Math Genie.
In today's video, I'll be talking about Introduction to Prime Factorization. So in my last video, I already talked about what prime and composite numbers are. And as a recap, for example, prime numbers are numbers like 17, where it only has factors of itself and number 1. And composite numbers are numbers that have more than those two factors, so 2 or more factors. So in this video, I'll be talking about prime factorization. Prime factorization is, let me just show you an example because that's I think it's an easier way to understand prime factorization. And the easiest example I think I can give you is the number 24. This is a pretty easy prime factorization number, and that will be 2 to the third power times 3. So when you first see this, you might be wondering, how does she get that, right? Because, 24 is on this side, and we just have a bunch of numbers multiplied here. Well, surprisingly, if you multiply 2 to the third power, which is 8, and 3, you get 24. So why do we have to know this? Why do we have to know this more terms just multiplied? Why do we have to know this? Well, you have to know this because for a lot of the problems that you'll encounter in math competitions, they will require you to use this concept because or if you don't use this concept, it will take too much time. So I do recommend you to go ahead and already have some numbers on top of your head for common numbers like 24, 16, 32, 200. Those numbers are pretty easy for prime factorization. So I do recommend you to go ahead and know the concept before walking into that competition room. So in this video, instead of just straight off explaining what prime factorization is, I'll be just solving some practice problems that where you have to prime factorize a number. The reason I tell you to prime factorize a number is because for larger numbers, when you're solving the problems, it might be more complicated to just use numbers like 5,000. It might be easier for you to use a number that in more expanded form here, which will help you quickly solve the problem. So just as a recap, again, prime numbers, the reason I talked about prime numbers in the previous video was because remember that the expanded form only uses prime numbers here. I don't write prime factorization in a times 3, right? You have to write it in using only prime numbers because we know that 2 is a prime number and 3 is a prime number. So that's some important things that you must keep in your mind. So let's go ahead and do some practice problems. The first number is a pretty easy number, I think, and it's 120. I recommend you to pause the video and resume it once you're finished solving the problem. Alright, so let's go ahead and prime factorize 120. So a lot of people like to use factor trees, which I'll be using today. However, I also recommend you to do it in like a ladder form that I like to call. So a lot of people tend to use the tree factor or the factor tree form, which is basically you kind of subdivide like this, like 12 and 10. But as you get larger numbers, you know that this factor tree gets like really big. It takes up a lot of space and it gets very confusing by the end. So I recommend you to use like the ladder form that I like to use. So for example, if you have the number 120 here, you will put this sign here and see what prime number goes into 120. Well, we know that, for example, 5 goes into 120. That's like the larger one. And we know we got 24. Can subdivide this by 3, 8. And we know that we get 2, 4, 2, 2. So the prime factorization, the prime form of the number 120 is going to be 2 to the third power, because we have 1, 2, 3 2's here, times 3 times 5. This is method number 1. I recommend you to use method number 1 because it takes up less time, it takes up less confusion. Just overall, this is much better way in my opinion. But let me do the factor tree form for those who worked it out that way. So you have 120. You can obviously subdivide this into 12 and 10, which is the easiest way to do it. You can subdivide 12 into 4 and 3, and 2 and 5. I recommend you to circle the prime numbers that you end up getting because that will help you, keep track of what numbers are prime. So we have 3, 2, and 5. I just marked it. And you can subdivide into 2 and 2. And you'll get the same result. The only reason I just prefer the latter version is because for larger numbers, it helps you keep track of what prime numbers you used. Let's do more problems. The second number I'll be doing is 448. Again, I recommend you to pause the video and resume it once you're finished working out the problem. So 448, let's first start again with method number 1, the method I like to use. So 448, let's see, we can obviously start with 2 because that's the easiest one. 2, 2, 4. I also see another 2, another 12, another 2, 56. I see a 7 now, 8, and I can speed it up here, 2 to the 3rd power. So I just got 2 to the 6th power times 7. And this only took me a couple of seconds, right? So if you get the hang of this, you should be able to do this really, really quickly. Because the whole purpose of this in math competition is for you to make this easier, right? The second method, of course, with the factor tree. 448. You can subdivide this, I would say, into 16 and 28. And you should be able to see this if you get the hang of it. And you get 8 and 2, 7 and 4. Subdivide this. I'll skip to 2 to the 3rd power, and 2 and 2. And if you keep track of it, you get 7 here, 3rd power, 2, 2, and 2. So you get the same answer, 2 to the 6th power times 7. So no matter what method you use, you still get the same answer. So be sure that you know these two methods. I do recommend you to, again, use the latter form. Thank you for staying to the end of this video.
Math Genie.